So we've seen in the previous section that a market is efficient so long as there are no external benefits on third parties, there are no positive externalities on third parties, or if there are no external costs, negative externalities on third parties. There's four situations that could occur. We could have negative externalities caused by producers, positive externalities caused by producers, negative externalities caused by consumers, positive externalities caused by consumers. So let's analyze each of these four cases. How those four possible types of externalities will affect the efficient outcome of the market. So the first one we'll look at is, let's look at negative externalities caused by producers. Negative externalities caused by producers. So for ceteris paribus assumptions hold here. We'll only do one at a time. If we analyze more than one at a time, the conclusion will not be immediately obvious. So we'll look at only one at a time. So since the negative externality caused by producers, i.e. we have a marginal external cost, because it's a negative externality, so it's a marginal external cost that we need to take into account. Now, producers is about supply. So we need to do something to the supply curve of the producer. So how did I know I need to address the supply curve? Because we're looking at the production. So production is about supply. Now we know supply is marginal cost. So the marginal cost is simply the internal costs of the firm. We haven't taken the external cost, example pollution, into account. We haven't taken the external cost, for example, pollution, into account. So if we add an external cost to the marginal cost, what will happen to the marginal cost? If we're adding another cost in, the marginal cost will increase. So this marginal cost curve should in fact be higher than what it currently is. So let's say if the firm had to pay the fisherman for the negative externality the firm caused upon the fisherman. So if the firm was somehow legally responsible for compensating the fisherman for polluting the river, if the firm was somehow legally responsible for compensating this fisherman, it would have a higher marginal cost. So when we include the marginal external cost on top of the marginal cost, we call this marginal social cost. MSC stands for marginal social cost. Marginal social cost is the sum of the marginal cost that the firm does acknowledge, i.e. its internal costs, plus the marginal external cost on the third parties. So the marginal cost of the firm is in fact much higher. So So this marginal cost curve shifts upwards. We call this marginal social cost. Since we're doing only one at a time, we're going to assume that external benefits are 0 in this example. So if we assume external benefits are 0, then marginal social benefit is equal to marginal benefit. So I'm not going to do anything to the demand curve. I'll just leave it as it is. So demand is marginal benefit, which we are now making equal to marginal social benefit, because we're not looking at external benefits in this example. We'll look at that in a separate example. So remember, the firm is producing at this point. This is the market equilibrium. The market is producing Q star and charging a price of P star. This is known as the private market equilibrium. However, the firm is not taking the external costs into account. If it did, the marginal cost would actually be much higher. And instead of producing at the market equilibrium, the firm would actually be producing at this point. Let's call that E2. We call E2 the allocatively efficient point. Rather, the firm should be charging a higher price. Let's call this P efficient. And the firm should be producing a lower quantity. Let's call that Q efficient. So, just to recap, the firm is here. The firm has no care about the negative externality it's causing and the harm it's causing the fishing industry. The firm is producing at this point, producing Q star and charging a price of P star. If we took the negative externality into account, the marginal cost curve would actually be much higher. So rather than producing at this point, the firm would be producing at this point. We call this the allocatively efficient point. You can also call the allocatively efficient point the social optimum. The allocatively efficient point is the social optimum. From society's point of view, i.e. taking everyone into account, not just the firm, not just the buyers of their product, not just the workers, but also the third parties, we should be here. Even though we are here, we should be here. We should be producing this quantity, and we should be charging this price. So the market failure here is the firm is overproducing and the firm is underpricing its product. The firm overproduces and underprices its product at the market equilibrium. The firm is overproducing at Q star and the firm is underpricing at P star. What's the solution in this case for this negative externality? How can we solve this problem? Well, the firm is not taking the externality into account. The firm is not taking the external cost into account. So the way we can force the firm to take an external cost into account is by charging them a tax. If we charge the firm a tax equivalent to the marginal external cost, this difference in height between the two is the marginal external cost. So this distance is the marginal external cost. So if we charge firms a tax, so let's say, what is the solution to this problem? The solution is to charge a tax equivalent to the marginal external cost that will force firms to take the external cost into account. Therefore, it will force firms to be efficient. Now, that is a negative externality caused by producers. Let's now look at negative externalities caused by consumers. Negative externalities caused by consumers. So it's still a marginal external cost that we need to address. The market is failing to take a marginal external cost into account. So, for example, smoking. Because of the passive smoke that comes on non-smokers. Okay, now, here's where students get confused. It's a marginal external cost because it's a negative externality, but because it's consumers, we need to look at the demand curve. Because demand is the consumption side of our story. So the problem is not the supply curve anymore. The problem is actually the demand curve, the position of the demand curve. Now, as you know, demand is marginal benefit. Demand is marginal benefit. Demand is marginal benefit, but there's an external cost here. What will happen to the benefit if there's an external cost? Will the benefit go up or will the benefit go down? Well, since a cost is a negative and a benefit is a positive, the external cost actually reduces the marginal benefit. So now, marginal social benefit is the marginal benefit minus the external cost. Because this pollution, this smoking is actually reducing society's extra benefit. MSB stands for marginal social benefit. So marginal benefit is the demand curve. The external cost is caused by the consumer, which is why I need to address the position of the demand curve. The demand curve is going to shift downwards because of this external cost. So the social benefit of cigarettes is actually lower than the marginal benefit seems to imply. Because of the external cost presented on third parties, the demand curve is not, the marginal benefit curve should not be there. It should actually be lower. So, let's see the problem. I'm assuming there's no external cost in this story because I'm just doing one at a time. So for this example, marginal cost is in fact marginal social cost as well. So I'm assuming, just for this example, the marginal external cost is 0. Therefore, marginal social cost equals marginal cost. The firm is producing here, yeah? This is where the firm is producing. This is the market equilibrium. The firm is producing P star. The firm is charging P star, sorry, and the firm is producing Q star. Whereas what they should be doing is actually producing here at E2. They should actually be producing much less. So the market failure here is that the firm is overproducing. The market failure here is that the firm overproduces the product. They should be producing here, taking the externality into account, but they're producing a much higher quantity. How can we shift the demand curve, i.e. shift the marginal benefit curve downwards? The solution, as in the case of production externalities, the solution would be a tax again. Except this would now be a tax on consumers as opposed to a tax on producers. In the previous example, where the negative externality is caused by producers, the tax is on producers. In this example, the negative externality is caused by consumers, so a solution would be to tax consumers. If you tax consumers, even though the price looks lower, after they pay the tax, the price is actually much higher. So if you charge a tax that is equal in distance to the marginal external cost, so this vertical distance here is the marginal external cost. If the tax is equal in distance to the marginal external cost, consumers will actually be paying a much higher price, P2 plus T, as opposed to the old price P star. So the market failure is firms are overproducing and underpricing the product. P star, the price is too low. We need to charge consumers more because they're harming those around them. We need to produce less because consumers are harming those around them. How do we make the equilibrium quantity fall and the equilibrium price to rise? To take the externality into account, we need to use a tax. And we need to place the tax on consumers.